Johnny Cash sank into a cave in 1967 with the intention of never emerging. He lay in total darkness, waiting to die, his flashlight dying deep inside. But everything changed when something occurred in that cave. A few years later, in 2003, he recorded a music video in which his wife watched him with silent affection while his body failed. She passed away 4 months before to his death. There was a covert conflict between the cave and that last video. No one noticed. We're learning the truth about the man in black's true fate today. During the last days of the Great Depression, when working families were dying, J.R. Cash was born in Kingsland, Arkansas on February 26, 1932. His parents were poor cotton farmers struggling to make ends meet, and he was the fourth of 7 children. Ray Cash occasionally made no more than $2 per day, working jobs that paid 15 or 20 cents per hour. On other days, he would travel 3 miles in search of any kind of labor so that his kids could eat. They gave their boy the initials J.R., which meant nothing at all, because they couldn't even agree on a name for him. By the age of 5, that youngster was carrying water to cotton fields, and by the age of 8, he was picking cotton himself. He sang in the fields because the rhythm relieved the ache in his back. He was fashioned by those fields, that labor, and that quiet. When J.R. was 3 years old in 1935, the family relocated to Doss Colony, a New Deal community established in Mississippi County by the government of Franklin Roosevelt. It was intended to provide impoverished families with a second opportunity. They were granted 20 acres of mostly uncleared land and a 5-room house without plumbing. The new task was to manually clear it. The crop was still cotton. They could own it if they put in enough effort and remained long enough. People continued because of that dream. The colony made an effort to sustain itself by building a school, a cooperative hospital, a factory that produced porcelain, and even a factory that produced toys and mattresses. Most of that, however, was short-lived. The lessons, the labor, and the dirt came last. Junior wore second-hand clothing while growing up in that home, occasionally sharing a bed with his brothers. They eventually expanded their farm to 40 acres by purchasing some surrounding abandoned land. His mother, Carrie, a devoted Pentecostal, started teaching him the gospel songs that would be a part of his life in that small home. She owned an antique piano and guitar. In her spare time, she also taught her son to play and to think of music as a divine gift. She put money aside just for him to take singing lessons. However, the instructor informed her that he didn't require them after 3 lessons, claimed that his voice was already flawless. At the age of 12, he began creating songs. He wrote what he couldn't speak out loud and sang what he felt. He treasured her old hymn book close to his heart after she passed away in 1991. Months before his death, in 2003, he recorded a little, subdued CD titled My Mother's Hymn Book. He referred to it as the most significant work of his life, performing the hymns Mom had taught him with just his voice and guitar. However, something darker and more profound influenced his life before music ever became a job. Jack Jr.'s older brother was his favorite, and his father, Ray, made no secret of it. Jack was more serious, stronger, and had already made the decision to become a preacher at the age of 14. Jack would read the Bible at the table every night while J.R. looked on. It was thought that Jack was meant to be. Junior was frequently reprimanded for being foolish or irresponsible, in comparison. That difference turned into a wound that never healed throughout the family's most trying time. Jack started working at the school's farm shop on May 12, 1944, using an industrial saw to cut wood into fence posts. J.R. pleaded with him to go fishing instead of working. In an attempt to persuade his brother to reconsider, he even brought 2 poles. Jack declined, claiming they required the funds. The saw tore through his flesh that day, from his chest to his abdomen. The damage worsened when he dragged himself off the table and crawled for assistance. According to some, a neighbor was with him before going missing. Jack did not die immediately, and Johnny subsequently remarked, "I always thought of it as murder." He endured for 8 days. Upon becoming cognizant at the end, he bid farewell to all of his family members before turning to face his mother and asking, "Mama, can you hear the singing? Do you see the angels?" When she replied that she didn't, Jack responded, "Oh, I do. How beautiful." He passed away at 6:44 a.m., May 20th. Ray, their father, became icy. He gazed at Johnny at the funeral service. "You hear that? That's nothing. That's what you are." He shook an empty can at home, and Johnny never forgot it. When he joined the U.S. Air Force in 1950, shortly after turning 18, Junior took the name John R. Cash because initials were not permitted in the military. He had his training in Texas, initially at Lackland and later at Brooks Air Force Base, where his ability to detect patterns in noise was observed. He learned to intercept Morse code and was able to decipher 40 words per minute. The 12th Radio Squadron Mobile, a Cold War force based in the same prison where Hitler penned Mein Kampf, transported him to Landsberg, Germany. The only call home was once a year, and the work was nerve-wracking, monotonous, secretive, and lonely. Even before Eisenhower heard it, Johnny claimed to have intercepted and relayed the first Western intelligence regarding Joseph Stalin's demise on March 5, 1953. However, not everybody accepted it. Later, other coworkers claimed he couldn't have decrypted it because he didn't speak Russian. But Johnny held on to the tale. "I was the ace," he added. He had insomnia as a result of the stress, and the insomnia brought him medication. He established the Landsberg Barbarians with other pilots at Landsberg, and purchased his first guitar from the commissary. At the Massal and officer clubs, they performed gospel and country music. They used a wire recorder to capture rudimentary demos. He started experimenting with the baritone that would eventually become his signature. Rhythm and lyrics. One of the airmen, C.V. White, treasured his blue suede shoes, and that anecdote became popular when Johnny related it to Carl Perkins later. While stationed there, Johnny also saw the prison movie Inside the Walls of Folsom Prison, which served as the inspiration for one of his most well-known songs. On July 3, 1954, he was honorably discharged. He married Vivian Liberto, who had waited for him for 4 years and innumerable letters. After he returned to Texas, they relocated to Memphis, where he attended Kaiser College to study radio and sold appliances door to door. However, he didn't enjoy civilian life. After deciphering Cold War secrets, he now sold washing machines. Something had to give. He met Luther Perkins and Marshall Grant, two mechanics who performed music on the weekends. In late 1954, they clicked right away. They identified as the Tennessee Two. They generally followed the gospel. Johnny went to Sun Records with his beat-up $5 German guitar and tried out for Sam Phillips. Gospel didn't appeal to Phillips. "It wouldn't sell," I told him. Consequently, Johnny returned with 2 songs, Cry, Cry, Cry and A Porter, which were both influenced by the train voyage home. They were signed by Phillips. Cry, Cry, Cry peaked at number 14 on the Billboard Country chart and sold over 100,000 copies in the South. He was invited to join Elvis Presley on the Louisiana Hayride Tour as a result. Next was Folsom Prison Blues, which was composed in Germany but recorded on July 30, 1955 in Memphis. It debuted with So Doggone Lonesome in December of that year, and peaked at number 4 in the country, and number 17 in the pop charts. It was intended to startle readers with the sentence, "I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die." Later, he paid roughly $75,000 to resolve a lawsuit, because the song substantially referenced the song Crescent City Blues, written by Gordon Jenkins in 1953. Johnny Cash's Hot and Blue Guitar, the first album ever published by Sun Records, was Cash's debut single. It featured I Walk the Line, which cracked the top 20 pop charts, and remained at the top of the country charts for 6 weeks. Paper put under guitar strings was utilized to simulate a drum in that recording, which was made in the Echo Heavy Studio at 706 Union Avenue. Not a drummer, just hard work. He was selling to everyone at Sun, including Elvis, by that point. Behind the scenes, however, things weren't going well. Johnny Cash departed Sun Records in 1958. He had had enough. While 5% royalties were the norm, they were only paying him 3%. Additionally, Jerry Lee Lewis was Sam Phillips's primary interest. However, the fact that they forbade him from recording gospel was what truly devastated him. It wasn't merely a creative impulse. His identity had always been rooted in gospel. He immediately recorded Don't Take Your Guns to Town after departing for Columbia Records. When it was released in December, it spent 6 weeks at the top of the country charts. On the pop charts, it even reached number 32. When W.S. Daft Luke Holland joined as drummer in 1960, he moved his band from the Tennessee 2 to Tennessee 3. Holland had played on blue suede shoes and collaborated with Carl Perkins. That boom chicka boom sound was set in stone from that very instant. However, he had already written I Walk the Line backstage in Gladewater, Texas, back in 1956. He referred to it as a promise to Vivian Liberto. Even playing back guitar runs in reverse on his tape recorder. He experimented until he discovered an odd progression. More than 2 million copies of the song were sold during its 43-week run at the top of the charts. However, it was already collapsing behind the scenes. He was taking pep pills by the end of 1956. Amphetamines were prescribed by the doctor to get through tour life. He recorded a song on loyalty in the same year. He was becoming paranoid and infidelity-prone. Naturally, that was untrue, but his daughter Roseanne later claimed that he wrote, "I'm going to stay true." He wasn't sober when he did record gospel, though. Hymns by Johnny Cash, his second Columbia album, was released in 1959. It was a dark dream, but it was his gospel dream. He was taking so many drugs by 1960 that he began to lose weight, cancel gigs, and lose his voice. He dropped from 200 to 155 pounds at age 61. His laryngitis was chronic. Those around him witnessed his mood swings and his dependence. A man was slowly unraveling while making the faith-related songs. Things weren't pure even when he was rising at the Grand Ole Opry. On July 7, 1956, he gave his first performance there, singing "So Doggone Lonesome," "Get Rhythm," and "I Walk the Line." Backstage at the Ryman that night, with his wife Vivian and infant daughter Roseanne at home, he promised June Carter that he would marry her someday. He was on national television by 1958, including The Jimmy Dean Show, but his drug use caused him to act wildly and miss signals. He was banned after performing intoxicatedly at the Opry in 1965 and smashing stage lights with a microphone stand. He smashed his nose for the third time, that same evening when he crashed his Cadillac. He and June Carter had fallen in love while traveling together by 1959. Their affair simmered quietly behind closed doors as he remained married to Vivian, and June told Rolling Stone, "I was miserable. I'm falling in love with somebody I have no right to fall in love with." Ring of Fire, co-written by June and Merle Kilgore, was released in 1963. It peaked at number 17 on the pop charts and led the country charts for 7 weeks. According to what Vivian would later write, Johnny informed her that he gave June half credit since she needed the money. That was a falsehood. June's love letters had previously been located by Vivian. In 1966, they got divorced. At about the same time, he became addicted. He was consuming as many as 100 tablets every day, barbiturates to come down, amphetamines to stay awake. He was banned after destroying a hotel in Vancouver in 1961. For amusement, he and his group began shooting Colt .45 pistols in the corridor one evening. Cherry bombs in restrooms turned into firearms in hallways. Saul Huliff, his manager since 1960, had to clear up the mess and pay damages. Cash continued to record hits, though, somehow. He overdosed in his mobile home in 1966, shortly after giving a performance in Toronto, and was discovered all but dead. June brought him back to life. He nearly died that same night. He was just getting off the stage. It was not uncommon for genius and devastation to coexist in that way. His concept album, Bitter Tears, which addressed Native American injustice, was published in 1964. They wouldn't play it on country radio stations. "Where are your guts?" he asked in a full-page billboard ad, which sold roughly 500,000 copies. Even as he was buried under medications, songs like Ira Hayes's ballad battled against history. Then the fire broke out. Cash and his nephew were fishing in the National Forest of Los Padres on June 27, 1965. Either a campfire he lit while intoxicated or a malfunctioning exhaust system, as he claimed, caused his pickup to catch fire. His nephew reported that 58 acres of protected condor habitat were destroyed by the fire. Out of the 53 birds, just 4 made it out alive. He was sued by the government for $125,127 home 52. "I don't care about your yellow buzzards," he said angrily, as he arrived at court high on amphetamines. $82,000 plus interest was ordered to be paid by him. He almost went bankrupt as a result. May 24, 1955, was Roseanne's birthday. She watched him disappear during binges as a child, then resurface decades later, and write letters filled with guilt pleading for her forgiveness. Vivian and their 4 daughters waited in the Hollywood Bowl parking lot in 1966. After the show, he said hello and departed with June. That year, Vivian filed for divorce. He was still legally married when he proposed to June on stage in Ontario in 1968. They tied the knot on March 1968. The Johnny Cash Show debuted on ABC the next year and ran from June 7, 1969, until March 31, 1971. On Nielsen ratings, it peaked at number 17. On the first show, Bob Dylan made an appearance. Stevie Wonder, Neil Young, Louis Armstrong, and Joni Mitchell also did. Cash continued to struggle with pills. "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash." He began each program with this salutation, but behind it was a man who was still struggling with withdrawal every week. However, it was successful. The program evolved into a fusion of activism, music, and outlaw culture. He recorded the renowned Folsom Prison Concert in 1968. On January 13, 2 performances took place in front of 1,000 prisoners, with armed guards observing from either side. The album won 2 Grammys, sold millions of copies, and peaked at #1 on the pop and country charts. Marshall Grant, his bassist, claimed that Cash was roughly 75% straight that day. He had been arrested smuggling 1,000 amphetamines in a guitar case across the Mexican border years prior. He traveled to San Quentin in 1969 to record another jail album, which went on to sell 3 million copies. He almost started a riot when he sang San Quentin, "I Hate Every Inch of You" during the performance. A Boy Named Sue, which became his sole #1 adult contemporary hit, was also performed by him for the first time. Jim Marshall took the well-known middle finger picture during rehearsal that same day. Later on, it came to represent Cash's unvarnished rebel persona. Johnny went clean for a spell, after June gave birth to John Carter Cash on March 3, 1970. He spent 7 years sober. In 1971, he underwent another baptism and put out the album Man in Black, which was a protest against injustice, poverty, and war. One of his quotes is, "The only good thing that ever came from war is a song." That's a great method to get your tunes out there. However, the reality was less clear. After breaking a rib in 1971, he had a covert relapse and continued taking medications in secret for years. In his lifetime, he gave about 30 jail performances, beginning in Huntsville in 1957. Along with 2 ex-cons, he called inmates, maintained contact with them, and spoke before the U.S. Senate in 1972, calling for sentencing reform. He discussed injustice within prison walls, rape, and suicide. For more than 10 years, the FBI maintained a file on him. According to the New York Times, he was the first bold and gritty advocate for social problems. In order to construct a chapel at Cummins Prison, he donated $5,000 so of his personal funds. Cash formed the Highwaymen alongside Chris Christopherson, Willie Nelson, and Juan Jennings in 1985. Over 500,000 copies of their debut album were sold, and the album's title track peaked at #1. They performed at arenas that sold out. Behind it all, Cash had become addicted to morphine. It began in 1983 when he was kicked and shattered multiple ribs by an ostrich at his Jamaican farm. He never really quit using the morphine that was prescribed to him. He would sneak into restrooms to take his medications while on tour. His hands trembled. His pals were unaware. During what appeared to be a resurgence, he came dangerously close to overdosing multiple times. He starred in The Pride of Jesse Hall, a CBS film, in 1981. It was about a coal worker who was illiterate and his battle for education. It was commended for bringing attention to adult illiteracy and attracted over 12 million viewers. Cash, however, was in withdrawal on set. At one point, he threw a chair across the room, broke down in tears, and forgot lines. According to his director, he was unable to grasp a pen since his pupils were dilated. Nixon encouraged Cash to sing Muskogee songs like Okie when he visited the White House in 1970. Cash declined. "What is truth?" he sung. Rather, a song supporting anti-war demonstrators. Stories accusing Nixon of being unpatriotic were leaked by his aides. Cash didn't care, though. He narrated an album about labor rights and native genocide in 1972. Later, he said that he represented people who are never invited by wearing black to the White House. He was never invited again by Nixon. Cash's 1972 Family Christmas album sold over 300,000 copies and peaked at #9 on the country chart of Billboard. June and their children were included in the recording. However, June discovered during those same sessions that Johnny had been having affairs with her sister, Anita Carter, since 1970. She snapped while filming, hurling ornaments at him and yelling, "You're destroying this family." She fled and spent 3 weeks with her mother. She had discovered hotel expenses. Anita's marriage in 1974 marked the end of the affair. As an apology, Cash wrote, "Help me make it through the night," but Christopherson ended up recording it instead. Johnny Cash entered Nicat Cave in Moran County, Tennessee, in 1967, with no intention of leaving. His years of amphetamine abuse had destroyed his body. He was losing his voice. He was losing his job. And he had made up his mind that this was the end of it. He spent hours crawling through the maze-like darkness of the cave system, a location so big and perplexing that it had previously killed other explorers. His flashlight died somewhere deep inside. The total blackness engulfed him. Cash waited for death to arrive while lying on the chilly rock floor. But he sensed something different instead. He would subsequently characterize this odd serenity as the result of supernatural influence. "I realized I was not in charge of my destiny," he stated. "God, not me, was going to decide when I would die." He crawled blindly toward it, inch by inch, until light eventually emerged through a fissure, following the tiniest hint of a breeze. His mother and June Carter were waiting for him outside with a basket of food when he came out, battered and dirty. For the first time in over 10 years, Johnny Cash took the stage sober on November 11, 1967, a few months after that day in the cave. He was frightened of the small high school gig. However, he found something that he had believed to be gone. The drug-free stage was not as scary as he had thought. Cash proposed to June Carter on stage in Ontario in February 1968, and the two became husband and wife a week later. They quickly became America's favorite country pair after their duet, Jackson, won a Grammy. However, there was a darker side to the picture-perfect marriage. Cash continued to have an affair with June's sister, Anita Carter, when she was pregnant with their son, John Carter, who was born in 1970. According to Robert Hilburn's 2013 biography, Cash's close circle knew about the romance openly, but it was kept well hidden from the public and his pious Christian fan base. Because Cash had allied himself with Reverend Billy Graham and established a reputation for faith and salvation, it was particularly outrageous. During his lifetime, the betrayal was never made public, and the marriage endured in spite of the damage it caused. They tried to keep their blended family together while raising them in a home in Hendersonville, Tennessee, with a view of Old Hickory Lake. Cash's addiction had pulled him back down by Christmas 1983. After his family organized an intervention, he spent 43 days checking himself into the Betty Ford Center. He would go on to refer to those 43 days as the best of my life, a time of intense introspection and epiphany. Following treatment, he recorded Johnny in April 1983, which was made available on August 29 of the same year. It included Bruce Springsteen songs like Johnny 99 and Highway Patrolman, and critics hailed it as a powerful record from a man at the bottom of his game. However, sales did not follow acclaim. I'm Ragged, But I'm Right, the album's soul-charting single, just about made it to number 75. After 28 years, he was dropped by Columbia Records in 1986, which was the worst blow. All of his well-known work had been released under that label since 1958. All of a sudden, Johnny Cash had no direction, no label, and, as he subsequently stated, he was adrift in his career. He put out 4 original albums during the following 7 years, but none of them attracted much attention. Cash would not regain his footing until 1994, when Rick Rubin joined the squad. However, there were instances prior to that revival that demonstrated how profoundly Cash's story had permeated American society. The Space Coyote, the spirit guide in Homer's chili-induced hallucination, spoke in Cash's distinctive voice during the January 5, 1997 episode of The Simpsons' El Misterioso, Diestro Homer. Many spectators didn't recognize him. The position was very symbolic, reflecting Cash's own spiritual transformation from the shadows of Nickit Cave to a man who felt he had been led by a higher power. Additionally, it was the final persona he played in which he wasn't himself. The 1980s were a cruel decade. The slump rocked Cash, who hadn't had a top 10 hit since 1978. The suicidal thoughts and depression that plagued him at Nickit Cave reappeared. The beast within me sprang from that gloom. His song wasn't it. It was written in 1979 by Nick Lowe, who was previously married to Cash's daughter Carlin. One night, when intoxicated, he sang a portion of it to Cash, who recognized the lyrics. Knowing that the song reflected the struggle he was having within himself, between his darker impulses and his softer side, he quizzed Lowe about its development for years. In 1994, he eventually recorded it for American Recordings. He was considered a relic at that point, having long before been dropped by Columbia. However, The Beast in Me and the stark haunting album on which it was featured would catapult him back to prominence. Bob Dylan's Orbit was the starting point for that return. Producer Rick Rubin came out to Cash after he performed at Dylan's 30th anniversary performance in 1992 and gave him total creative freedom, something no one else had. Between May and December 1993, they made recordings in the United States, primarily at Rubin's living room in Los Angeles and Cash's cabin in Tennessee. Two of the recordings were made at Johnny Depp's Viper Room, which was where River Phoenix passed away 5 weeks prior. It was released on April 26, 1994, and won the Grammy for Best Contemporary Folk Album. It reached at number 17 on the Billboard charts. During those sessions, Cash, 62, was recuperating from a significant health issue and another drug relapse. He didn't think his career could be saved by a heavy metal and rap producer. However, the understated sound brought him back into the spotlight with Generation X, which consisted of children who only knew Johnny Cash as a phantom from their parents' past. Even devoted fans were taken aback by Dia's Gone, a murder song that emerged from that record. Supermodel Kate Moss played the role of the dead bride in the Anton Corbijn directed video. Cash had a ghostly appearance, reminiscent of Bela Lugosi's most terrifying morphine nightmares. The song resonated during a period of intense interest in violent art and garnered Grammy nominations. Nick Cave's Murder Ballads, Kurt Cobain's Death, and Naturally Born Killers. Nobody was aware that Cash's health was rapidly deteriorating. Undiagnosed autonomic neuropathy was the condition that would characterize his last 10 years of life. Even the host became silent when he sang Gone on David Letterman by Dalia. Hurt, which debuted on American 4, followed. In 2002, the man changes his mind. 7 months before Cash's passing, in February 2003, the video was shot. It was filmed in the now-defunct House of Cash Museum by director Mark Raymond, who candidly depicted the deterioration and Cash's deteriorating body. For a moment, June Carter appears, quietly, lovingly observing him. On May 15, 2003, she passed away. Just 4 months later, on September 12, Johnny followed. The Hurt video won the Grammy for Best Short-Form Music Video and was nominated for 6 MTV Video Music Awards, making Cash the oldest nominee ever, aged 71. It had sold more than 1 million digital copies. The video is still regarded as one of the most eerie farewells in music history, even though the house where it was filmed burned down in 2007. Shortly before that, on June 26, 1994, Cash had performed in front of what was probably the largest crowd of his life, 100,000 people, at the Glastonbury Festival. After showing him holy sights earlier that week, Reverend Jim Thompson, the Bishop of Bath and Wells, introduced him in his signature black suit. The audience screamed back lines during A Boy Named Sue, roared with a love Cash hadn't experienced in decades, and let out train noises during Let the Train Blow the Whistle. For the first time in Glastonbury's history, that performance was shown on television, demonstrating that the man in black could still win over a new generation of fans. In September 2003, Thompson passed on the same week as Cash. By then, the American recording series had completely revived a career that had been thought to be over and sold over 5 million copies. Nothing affected him more than June's passing. Following complications from heart valve surgery at Baptist Hospital in Nashville, she passed away at the age of 73. The operation took place on May 7, 2003. She was put on life support after suffering a heart arrest on May 14. There, Johnny had also been admitted to the hospital. He was also readmitted for surveillance after she passed away. Less than 2 months after losing daughter, on July 5, 2003, Cash performed in public for the last time at the Carter family fold in Hilton, Virginia. He spoke in front of Ring of Fire, despite being in a wheelchair and having a weak, tremulous voice. The essence of June. I am overshadowed tonight by Carter's affection for me and my love for her. As always, Grandma gave me strength and inspiration by coming down from heaven for a brief visit with me tonight. 2:00 a.m. Johnny Cash passed away at the age of 71 on September 12, 2003, due to complications from diabetes that resulted in respiratory failure. After a 2-week stint in the hospital for a gastrointestinal condition, he had recently been released. He had suffered from autonomic neuropathy for years, which interfered with the regulation of acid in his stomach. As the acid accumulated, it was pushed into his trachea and esophagus, where it seeped into his lungs. They were already browned by decades of heavy smoking. X-rays revealed that the pink spots had disappeared. He was eventually overcome by the acid damage, on top of the damaged lung tissue. Following June's passing, Rick Rubin recalled what Cash had said. "I will perish if I have nothing to do, so you must keep me employed." Following his passing, A secret room at the House of Cash estate in Hendersonville, Tennessee, yielded hundreds of tapes. These included recordings of 49 unreleased tracks from July 1973, under the title Personal File. Vintage American tunes, such as I'll Take You Home Again, Kathleen, Galway Bay, Missouri Waltz, and Drink to Me Only, With Thine Eyes. A few weeks prior to his passing, on August 21, 2003, he recorded his last songs, such as Like the 309 and Engine 143. Cash had started off in uniform. During the Cold War, he had been stationed in Landsberg, West Germany, as a staff sergeant in the U.S. Air Force. In March 1953, he claimed to have been the first American to intercept news of Joseph Stalin's death. Although he repeated it frequently, some biographers questioned this story.